Marta, crowned 6 times the world's best football player by FIFA, is about to play her last Women's World Cup, which means it's the 37-year-old athlete's last shot at helping Brazil get its first title.
I mean, I grew up watching her play, and she was, Marta. And whatever she brings, it's very special. So I think the world needs to see that one more time.
But why has the country of football's women's team not won any championships until now? Let's find out.
Brasil tricampeão mundial de futebol.
In the 70s, Brazil was already the land of football we know today. Pelé was already considered the best player in history. Brazil had already won 3 World Cups, and the national team's yellow shirt was already widely celebrated as a synonym of the beautiful game. Throughout the 20th century, football became a reason of pride for all Brazilians. And with the sport's professionalization in the beginning of the 1930s, football also became a path out of poverty for many young people. But not for girls. The practice of football by women was banned in Brazil in 1941. Some matches were organized until the early 1940s, but instead of attracting fans, they sparked outrage, mostly from men. Following the buzz, then-President Getúlio Vargas issued a decree that was supposed to protect women from the violence of the sport, which could harm their motherly nature. The decree was not revoked until 1979, and it was only in 1983 that women's football became legal again. Meanwhile, in the United States, a 1972 bill called Title IX made gender equality mandatory in education, including collegiate athletics. By no coincidence, football, or soccer, became hugely popular among women in the United States, and 51 years later, the U.S. national team is the most successful women's football national squad, with 4 World Cup titles and 4 Olympic gold medals. 44 years passed between the creation of Brazilian men's national team and its first World Cup championship. And another 28 years went by between the country's first title in the sport and the women's national team's first match in 1986. The same year, Marta was born. Women had to walk a long path in Brazil to conquer the most basic right of just practicing the sport. One could argue that they could have benefited from Brazil's long football tradition overall, but in reality, the struggle to achieve even basic conditions for practice, already hard considering legal and systemic delays, was made even harder due to structural gender inequality and sexism. It was only recently that the women's national team has been allowed to use the Brazilian Federation's training center. For years, they could only use it when the men's team was not there. And it was just in 2020 that the Brazilian Football Confederation, or CBF, established equal treatment, payment, and prizes for both the men and the women's squad in the Olympic Games, but not for the World Cup. These achievements came late, after a long history of poor conditions and a struggle for recognition. If the conditions for the national team were not ideal, in Brazilian clubs the situation for women was even worse, meaning that many professional players could not dedicate themselves exclusively to the sport. And to get some insight on that, we spoke with Ivy Casagrande, former footballer and current head of performance of the Brazilian women's national team.
My first experience in football, like 11v11 football, I think we barely would go to the gym. I think I've been through the gym. I had to go to the gym outside of the club because there's no structure or resources available. We didn't have somebody to actually with structure and manage the load, and the training sessions. And I think today we have like a holistic view of performance where we have doctors, we have physios, we have psychologists. Back then, I had problems with my confidence as a player, and you just had to deal with it because you might not have the resources to deal with it back in the day.
and sometimes their only option was to leave the country to find decent working conditions.
As soon as I get to the club, it's already 3 o'clock. We train until 6. I get home at around 9:30, 10 p.m. At that point, I'm completely exhausted. At the time, I wanted to be a doctor, so it was impossible for me to do that, or even do both. So that's when I found out about America, and that I could potentially do both and have a degree and actually be able to do to play in a competitive environment at the same time as having the degree, which I thought I always think it's very important, because football is not forever and you never know. It's so unpredictable, with injuries and stuff like that. So for me, it was very good that I had that degree, and that's why I'm here. I think it made it easier, that kind of transition. So yeah, that was the reason that I left Brazil. Was because of that.
It was not until 2019 that the CBF made it mandatory for clubs to maintain a women's squad, making a Brazilian women's league possible. These milestones have a lot to do with Marta and her teammates, like Formiga and Cristiane. Marta's generation grew up in a time when they could play football but still faced many challenges to make a career out of it. When they made it to the national team, bringing visibility and support to Brazilian women's football was also a goal. Since the 2000s, they've led the Brazilian national team to success in various women's competitions. It started with winning the 2003 Pan American Games, which presented Marta to the world, then a second place in the 2007 World Cup, and the silver medals won in the 2004 and 2008 Olympic Games. It is not a coincidence that after all the efforts that Marta's generation put into developing the sport, the conditions are slowly getting better. Whether Brazil wins the World Cup or not, Marta's achievements are solid, both on and off the pitch. Pelé's father was already a football player who gave the king lessons from early on. Afterwards, Pelé became a role model for millions of Brazilians. Marta didn't have someone to look up to like that, but that's now one less problem for future generations.